Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley. Poor boy, you're bound to die. This time tomorrow, reckon where I'll be, down in some lonesome valley, swinging from a white oak tree. Oh, boys, now hang down your head, Tom Dooley.
You know, I never thought about it this way. Obviously, I've known this song since I was a child, because in my household, we played songs about hanging people a lot when I was a child. No, I've known this song since I was a child, and it's much more neck-centric than I really... Because it's two things, right? He's got to hang down his head in shame and regret, and then he's going to be hanged by his neck. And so it's really a song about necks, and I probably wouldn't have understood that or thought about it were it not for the man sitting right near me here in the studio, and that would be Kent Dunlap. Kent Dunlap is a professor of biology at Trinity College, strong background right here in Hartford, strong background in zoology, and the author of The Neck, A Natural and Cultural History. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right. And maybe if Tom Dooley had better posture his whole life, he wouldn't have gotten in so much trouble. You know, maybe all that hanging his head, just led to everything that caused him to get hanged.
No doubt, no doubt. It is true that hanging the head can mean so many different things. For example, as you mentioned, that's sort of a gesture of sorrow. It's also a gesture of piety. We bow our head to pray and so forth. It's doing the other direction. The head is often a act of defiance or a haughtiness as well. So the position of the head has all sorts of meanings within our culture. Yeah,
I mean, I think not for nothing did Truman Capote refer to this coterie of women, these high society women around him, as his swans. Because there's sort of an elegance to that idea of these women with these swan-like necks with $80,000 necklaces on them and stuff like that. Yeah, there's so much semiotics to the neck, and we'll be getting to a lot of it. But I think we should just begin. I mean, your book is so powerful in just talking about the essential nature of the neck. I mean, we're sitting here and, I've shaken my head a little bit while I'm talking, and I might be nodding a little bit while I'm talking, and I'm talking, which means a whole bunch of things are going through my neck. And so one of the things you do is you sort of talk about the neck as either one big superhighway or perhaps like I-84 and I-91, just a lot of traffic going both. So say a little bit about, the stuff that you express in gallons and tons and stuff like that is just mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. And when I first looked at that, I just sort of couldn't believe the calculations, and I had to have several of my colleagues check my calculations. But yes, so we take in air, of course, and we move blood from our heart to our head that direction, and we also swallow all that. And altogether, if you look at the volume of fluids, both air and liquid that's going up through our neck, it's about 3,000 gallons in a day, all weighing about 2,000 pounds or more. And that's just on a restful day. Like if you're out there playing soccer or biking or whatever, you're going to be pumping your heart a lot harder, and you're going to be pushing a lot more weight up your neck.
Yeah, the other one that blew my mind is when you cough, the air is moving 625 miles an hour through your neck.
Sometimes it's so fast it feels like it's going to blow your whole head off, right?
And the other part of this is also the neck's doing so many things, but another thing it's doing is supporting the head. And the head weighs, about 10 pounds, something like that, right?
That's right. It weighs about 10 pounds when it's squarely on our shoulder, but as sort of a 21st century problem that we've all become familiar with is that when you lean it forward in a position that's typical of operating our devices, it weighs about 5 times as much, about 50 pounds. So more or less the equivalent of having a 7-year-old child resting on your shoulders.
But the other thing that blows my mind about that, too, is, and you write about this in the book, there are these cultures where people carry huge amounts of weight on their heads, too, which would seem like it would be terrible for the neck. But it seems, if you've ever, been portaging a canoe or a kayak, putting it on your head, it's a very tempting thing. It seems very like a good stable support.
Yes, it is. We're a rare species that way, in that we have our head upright, and so consequently, as far as I know, we're the only species that carries things on top of our head. I mean, fortunately, we're built like a column, more or less, and our neck has certain curvatures that allow us to bear that weight. And yes, across the world and across history, humans have borne an enormous amount of weight on their neck. A typical load might be 60 pounds, but it may be even more than that. And one thing I talk about in the book, which is rather remarkable, is that certain portions of ships were actually borne on porters' heads as they carried certain fragments of the ship from the coast of Africa clear into the inland lakes, where they were reassembled into full ships.
Just amazing. And as people who believe in intelligent design, the neck would be sort of a good argument for it, but sort of a bad argument for it too. For example, it seems to me putting the food pipe next to the windpipe, you're just kind of asking for trouble there inside your neck.
Sure. No engineer would possibly have designed a transport system that way, where you had these crossing pipes, and the consequence of getting that junction wrong is a question of life and death. So we inherited from our fish-breathing ancestors this peculiar position of having the windpipe in front of our food tube, our esophagus. But unfortunately, when we breathe or when we eat up in our head, the order of those is in the opposite direction. So somewhere at the top of our throat here, we have this crisscrossing of pipes that's and a valve which is governed by a little flap called the epiglottis, and that means that we've got to make sure that the food does not go down that trachea in the wrong way, or it's a big problem.
We'll come back to some of that too, but we also should talk a little bit about the aesthetics of the neck. And the aesthetics of the neck are of concern to women in particular, I think, although that doesn't seem entirely fair. But first of all, we should say we collected some voices from the street and by our intern, Angelica Gajewski. We're going to hear a little bit of that right now, I think. A1, sir.
How do you feel about your neck?
I don't know. It's kind of there. I don't really think about it that often.
I feel like I think about when my neck is really exposed with certain tops I wear.
I kind of am indifferent to it. I don't know if there's maybe put some cologne on it.
My neck, it is not, again, that it's like hurting all the time, every day, but it I don't know how to explain it. I mean, like, I can switch it, I can like move it around, but at the same time, there's always some kind of tension that I feel that I honestly feel is a reminder that perhaps I should do more exercise or stuff like that.
To be honest, I don't really think about my neck at all.
The only time I really think about my neck is if it's sore from like sleeping.
That's true, yeah.
But the neck is important because it connects your head to your body.
There's no arguing with that. They sound like they better read your book. Most of those ideas are somewhere there in your book.
They are indeed, but also you heard from a lot of those voices that people don't think about their neck that much. And one of the points of this book is that it's actually a very underappreciated portion of their body.
Absolutely. And the stuff about sleep, I mean, the pillow industry exists because of necks, right? No necks, no need for a pillow.
That's right. I mean, for example, most animals, because they are flattened across their shoulders, they don't have any problem laying on their side because their head would be right next to the ground. But we humans, with our relatively broad shoulders, if we were to lay on our side, our head would flop over in this really uncomfortable position.
I think also, one thing that comes through again and again in the book, and I hadn't thought about it that much, is that it's a fairly non-uniform aspect of our bodies. In other words, your neck and my neck are really different. One of the reasons that there's 42 different kinds of pillows on Amazon is because people's necks are not the same person to person.
Absolutely, and that's they differ in length, they differ in strength, they differ in the history of being strained and so forth. So I think there's consequently, just as you say, our pillow is one of our most prized or individualized pieces of equipment that we have.
I'm going to tell you something right now that I've never told to anybody except my partner, who obviously knows this. And please don't tell anyone else, except that I'm saying it on the radio. I have two.
Not very good at hiding your secrets, Colin.
I have two pillows, and they have names. My pillows are named Fred and Wilma. And if I don't have Fred and Wilma, like I'm on a trip or something, typically not very happy.
I would hate to say these aren't Stone Age pillows, are they?
No, I don't know why they're called that, but good comeback. So another thing that I think you've wound up thinking about a lot and talking a lot about is that whole idea of the neck as an aesthetic, the Capote's swans, and of course Nora Ephron famously wrote about being so unhappy about her neck. So it turned out that one of our bosses here has some strong feelings about that. Her name is Robyn Doyon-Aitken. She's one of my favorite people who works here. And so she did a little audio essay for you to listen to, and we're going to play it right now.
Throughout my 40s, my neck wasn't a thought in my head. But I'm 50 now, and let's just say I think about my neck a lot. I think about other people's necks too. I don't want to. It's kind of unavoidable though, especially in the last 5 years when tech neck became a thing. Tech neck are those deep creases, or worse, neck rolls that you see reflected back at you from your iPad or laptop. They're there whether you're looking at a screen or not. Don't get me wrong, I prefer tech neck to turkey neck. Turkey neck is exactly what it sounds like, that dreaded waddle. Turkey necks look weird even on turkeys, and now I have one? In 2006, Nora Ephron wrote a collection of essays mostly about being a woman and aging. It was titled, I Feel Bad About My Neck. Girl, same. My favorite line from the book is, quote, our faces are lies and our necks are the truth, unquote. That truth is that our necks age us. They age us first and faster and more obviously. There's no photo filter, cream, or serum that's taking years off my neck. Oh, there are things women can and do try to resculpt their necks. There's lasers, microneedling, a thing called quantum RF, and good old-fashioned Botox. But they're all out of my price range and a little scary sounding in the context of the thing holding up my head. I know. In times like these, there are much bigger things to worry about than a crease-marked, saggy neck. That was actually a criticism Ephron faced when she published her book. Women have more important things to focus on than how their necks look on Instagram. I'm pro-aging and I believe in body positivity, I swear. It's just that I plan on thinking about those important things with my head popping out of a turtleneck.
So just react any way you want.
Well, it sounds like you and Nora may have had some extensive conversations about this, and I don't think that you're alone in this. Yeah, the neck is, Nora calls it our most honest body part because it reveals the age so well. And the neck has some unusual features that do that. For one, the skin on the neck is very, very thin and more prone to sagging and losing its fibers and so forth. It's also not very, the skin is not very attached to the muscles underneath, so that helps it droop as well. And it's if all that isn't enough, one of the muscles that are in the neck skin, often over age, tends to sort of split into different cords and also reveals this sort of cord-like appearance. So there's things in the biology that definitely make the neck an honest indicator of our age.
But it's also, I think, as you can hear in Robyn's description, it's kind of gendered. I think women do worry about their necks more than men do. And I mean, first of all, that's kind of part of a central unfairness about life. But also, the neck is both a very erogenous zone, and just in terms of nerve endings and stuff like that, and it's tied to erotic cues as well, so that we, and in different cultures it's different. I know in Japan, the back of the neck, the nape of the neck is very, very important kind of sign of beauty and sexual attractiveness. And I assume that's why, when you see Marilyn Monroe singing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, she's got this elaborate necklace on too. The ornamentation of the neck, the decoration of it, which calls attention to it, is it's got a lot of layers to it.
Absolutely. And in terms of that gender difference, I mean, just look at almost any kind of shirt of any sort. It's pretty much the case that a women's shirt is just going to expose more. And in formal wear, you'll almost always see a woman's neck and the area right below it exposed, whereas in formal men's wear, it's almost always going to be buttoned up and concealed with a tie and so forth. But yes, given that, there's all of this ornamentation that we do to the neck that calls attention to it. And I think one of the reasons there is it's this place that's more or less a signpost of our human body. It's a place where we can hang things, be it ties or necklaces or whatever, and it's certainly in the view of the face, so you can in one glance get a view of both the face of the person as well as their ornamentation on the side of it. And so I think those two features have made the neck a really prominent position for using the neck as a source of communication. That is visual communication. But also then people have mentioned this idea of putting scents on there and perfumes that communicate as well. The neck is also, it has very thin skin, but it also is very vascularized. So it's a pretty hot part of the body. Right. And it's a good place to sort of get perfumes to volatilize towards the nose of your potential mate.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, I mean, it's, I think, probably unfair to women the amount of pressure, social pressure, aesthetic pressure that's put on their necks. With guys, I mean, we probably should just talk about the necktie for a second. Obviously, there's a person occupying the White House right now who has very eccentric ideas about how to even wear a necktie, how to even tie a necktie. But, I mean, the necktie has a different set of semiotics, I would assume. Very much so, and a lot of it has to do with the color, but then especially in the past, it has been to do with a particular knot that is tied. One thing I talk about the book is this, in the book is this feature of 19th century or 18th century England, where a gentleman would often carry around this book that had no fewer than 29 different styles of knots. And each knot meant a certain different thing and was appropriate for a different kind of social circumstance. So we're not quite that way in the 21st century, but still, nonetheless, I can guarantee you every 4 years there are journalists out there that are analyzing the knots and the colors and the positions of the ties of the presidential candidates. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, and we have some of those people on our show pretty regularly. But I thought Obama was maybe going to kill the necktie because he didn't like neckties, and there were a lot of pictures of him pre-presidency with just an open shirt collar. But I guess he had to bow to tradition. But I was kind of hopeful about that because I'm not a big fan of ties either. We should talk a little bit, too, about the way we use our necks to turn our heads for portraiture, for selfies. I went back and, because I was in my mind, I went back and I looked at Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring. She's got her neck cranked way around. I mean, it's almost like Linda Blair, like she's like moving it so far. There's something about our understanding of the best way to paint or photograph somebody that isn't sort of dead on, kind of 180 degree looking straight at the camera or the portrait artist.
It's so true, and that's particularly true in Western art since the Renaissance and so forth. It's you walk into the wings of museums which are again due to focused on Western art, and it's pretty hard to find a portrait of anyone that has their head square on their shoulders. And this is also not just true in formal art, but as you mentioned, it's somehow really intuitive, so that when we start taking self-portraits, that is with selfies and so forth, you almost never see a self-portrait with a head straight on as well. Someone did a big analysis of Instagram and found that really only something like less than 10% of the photos had the head square on the shoulders. And I think it speaks to the fact that also how we respond to our driver's license or our passport, where we're kind of required to have our head square on our shoulders. And those photographs, we often hate them, and to a large degree, it's because they seem so expressionless.
Yes, I happen to be very well acquainted with someone, I have to share a life with someone who will make them retake her driver's license photo until she's happy with it. But it's hard to be happy with it for all of the reasons that you're saying. So, we began the show playing Tom Dooley, which is about a man who's hanging down his head, but he's also about to be hanged. I mean, the vulnerability implicit in the neck. If you want to kill somebody by slitting their throat. You're probably going to hit the carotid artery. The neck is hard to protect, I think, from assaults. But say a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the true and maybe obvious facts of the neck is that it's a region of high flexibility, and we need to be able to move our head in all different directions, and consequently the neck has to be very thin. Well, one byproduct of this is the fact is that all the vital tubes that run between our torso and our head have to then be very near our surface. So the arteries in our leg, for example, are deep down within, but the arteries in our neck are much more near the surface, and consequently much more available to people who want to kill you. The same would be true of the air passageway and so forth. So it's been an area of deep vulnerability in that regard. But also as a constriction, it's a place that you can easily constrain someone. So that's where in the past humans have shackled their prisoners, as well as cut their heads off and strangled them and so forth.
Yeah, it's going to get a little dark here. But yes, and like Jack Bauer had that thing on 24 where he would just sort of choke somebody just enough so that he was a specialty. He could make them pass out. But yeah, we should say a little bit more about the methods of execution because it's weird and sad, but also kind of interesting. And first of all, one thing I don't think I had quite understood is that there's two kinds of hanging, and there's one that if you have to be hanged, you want way more than the other one.
That's right. So for many, many centuries, hanging was a pretty slow and gruesome death. That is, you hoisted someone up with a rope around their neck, and they generally suffocated quite slowly. But then, for better or worse, there became the technology of the gallows, where they would be suspended from a rope, but then they would fall very rapidly, and this would break their spinal cord and hopefully be a much quicker death. But even yet, somewhere around the 18th century, people were seeing that this hanging was a pretty gruesome death, and they decided to invent a more humane way of executing people. And there was a French guy around the French Revolution who was really motivated to sort of make execution an equal opportunity kind of thing. And he invented the guillotine. Louis Guillotine invented this instrument to make sure that everyone, regardless of their class, had a relatively painless death.
Yeah, I hadn't really grasped that obviously, we don't have pleasant associations with the guillotine, but kind of like the way, Nobel invented TNT and then has the Peace Prize. The guillotine is supposed to be kind of, as you say, an instrument of democracy or of fairness, that the poor person is entitled to a quick and relatively tidy death, just the way the rich person.
Exactly.
So we should also say that in an interesting way, I think the neck is, particularly in terms of images associated with certain kinds of burdens too. Like, I don't know, if Coleridge made a conscious choice to hang the albatross around the mariner's neck, but it's there. It's there in the idea of the yoke. It's there in Christ being forced to carry his own cross. That idea that when you're burdened, somehow or other that burden piles up on your neck.
And yes, the yoke in particular has been a metaphor throughout at least Western history as this emblem sort of that would signify burden and oppression, as though you were a beast that was burdened by and controlled by something else. And but there's also been another side of the emblem of the yoke as well, and that is in some, albeit rarer cases, the yoke has been sort of used to sort of indicate a beautiful bondage. For example, the unification in a marriage, or the unification between a person and that person's God, and so forth.
All right, we're going to take a little pause here. We're talking about the book, The Neck, A Natural and Cultural History, with my guest, Kent Dunlap. We'll have more to say, especially about the animal kingdom, when we get back.
Right side of my neck still smells like you. The right side of my neck still smells like you. Like you.
Won't you wear my ring up around your neck to tell the world I'm yours by heck? Let them see your love for me, and let them see by the ring around your neck. Won't you wear my ring?
That's Elvis, of course, and our guest Kent Dunlap was just saying, going out of the previous segment, about how the idea of people being yoked together in love and marriage. Elvis has his own idea about how to do that. Kent Dunlap is a professor of biology at Trinity College in Hartford and the author of The Neck, A Natural and Cultural History. Your background is heavily in zoology, but before we go to non-human animals, I think it makes sense just to set this up to just briefly say, how did we evolve to have, we humans evolve to have the necks that we have?
Well, that's a good question. It's a reasonable question to ask. Why does anything have a neck? It's so vulnerable? So there must be a good reason to have a neck to begin with. And what zoologists sort of landed upon was that one of the beauties of the neck is it allows us to scan the world and move our senses around that's separate from our body. And so consequently, we can be moving in one direction but glancing in another direction. Or we can not move our body at all and twist our head in order to scan the world. So that was surely a very important early selective force on the formation of the neck. One thing that's happened in humans is we've adopted a very odd posture, and we also have become very manual. So whereas most quadrupedal animals use their head and their neck to grasp things from the ground, we use our hands to grasp from the ground. And consequently, that means that our head doesn't really need to be long. So compare, for example, your neck with the neck of your dog. And the dog of a neck has to reach the head all the way to the ground, but we don't need a neck quite so long.
Although, with all the time we're spending staring at our phones and tablets, as Robyn was saying earlier, our necks are craning down more and more, hence that expression, tech neck. So yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to be able to sort of see around the periphery of your gaze, having an owl neck would be super good, right?
Wouldn't you love it? Wouldn't you love it? So, necks, the owls of necks are notorious, and they no doubt have given owls this notion of being wise because they can spin, they can see all around themselves as well. But the biological reason for their twisty necks largely has to do with their eyes. That is, they are nocturnal predators, and as nocturnal predators, they need very large eyes. But without going into it in a lot of detail, the way that they make their eyes large are not by making big spheres, but making sort of cylinders. Consequently, their eyes can't move around in their head. So in order to gaze around them, they have to move their whole head around rather than like us, where we can move both our eyes and our neck to see around us.
So an owl cannot give you the side eye.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's got to just turn right at you. I had, the kind of thing that you don't know until you read this book. And so it's also interesting, I think, when we think about interesting ways of evolution, it's interesting to think about turtles. And I know you're really into turtles too. So say a little bit about, because the neck. One of the things that I have noticed recently, and these clips kind of go viral on social media, is that you think mostly of turtles withdrawing their neck and their heads into their shells. But a lot of turtles are really good at shooting their neck out so that they can grab something really, really fast sometimes.
Absolutely. It's pretty phenomenal. And you're right, Colin, I really am into turtles. And if I was going to reveal one of my secrets, is that if I was going to be reincarnated, I would certainly be reincarnated as a turtle. They live such calm lives, seemingly, and you think of that calmness as attributable to the fact that they're living in a fortress, that is their shell. And that's true, no doubt, but also their fortress would not nearly be so protective if they didn't have a very flexible neck that would allow them to draw their head within their shell. But having said that, it's true that if you look at early on in turtle evolution, the neck was largely about shooting the head forward as much as it was pulling it under their shell.
Maybe even a little more so, I think. There are some of the earliest turtles who clearly can shoot or could have, back in those days, shot their necks out. Not clear they could have gotten them all the way into their shells, though.
Exactly, and they have a remarkably expandable neck, which allows them to suck a huge amount of water and whatever prey might be in that water into their throat.
Yeah, there's even like this snake neck turtle I was looking at. It's like, and like its name, it's a really long neck that comes out there.
Unbelievable.
So we should also say that necks seem to have evolved or have adapted in all the ways that we're talking about, in ways that kind of suit the animal that has them. But they're also important because certain animals need to kill other animals for food. And this is something that you go into in the book, that it's helpful if you're a carnivore and a predator that there's a neck that you can snap.
Absolutely. So many predators will grab their food and just eat them whole, and so it doesn't. And in this case, the prey is much smaller than the predator. But for predators that have a propensity to attack things that are larger than themselves, think about lions or wolves or something like that, they have two problems. One is that they need to find a place on this prey animal that's small enough that they can grab their jaws around it. And secondly, they want to grab a big prey item someplace where they themselves can't get hurt. So if you attack a deer on its leg, it could kick you. If you attack some other kinds of animal at its head, it could bite you and so forth. But the neck is very soft and pliable and thin, and so you can wrap your predatory jaws around this vulnerable area.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that you make in the book about Komodo dragons, which is, they need to do that to kill something. They'll snap the neck. But then, what have you got? You got a big old antelope or something. How are you going to get it into bite-sized pieces? And so they use their necks at that point, right?
Absolutely. So then they use their neck muscles to yank off flesh from their prey items. And crocodiles do it in a pretty remarkable way. Often they will do this so-called death roll, where after they've killed their prey, they'll take a bite of flesh, and they'll go then into this remarkable, very fast, full-body rotation to rip the flesh off of their prey.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of fang and claw here in this segment here. So maybe we should go with something a little bit more peace-loving. And you probably get asked more questions about giraffes than any other animal. So let's get the giraffe thing out of the way.
Sure. Giraffes probably, no doubt, have the most famous of all necks. In fact, it's practically hard to open up any introductory biology textbook without seeing the giraffe neck as an example of evolution. And in these textbook stories, the function of the neck has always been assumed to be able to reach high up into the trees to get leaves when during periods of drought. And this has been sort of the classic notion of the selective pressures on the giraffe neck for a long, long time, and Darwin included. But more recently in the 20th century, people were looking at the lives of giraffes and noticed actually even during periods of drought, the giraffes rarely seek leaves that are that high. So maybe it's not that important, or at least not always that important. What they saw much more commonly is a different use of the neck. That is, male giraffes would take their necks and in competition for females would bash their heads and necks against each other in this sort of sexual combat.
See, giraffes more complicated than you were giving them credit for. So, we talked in the previous segment about the way that we decorate or ornament our necks, either with jewelry or neckties or whatever. But it's not exclusively a human thing. I haven't really thought very much about why male lions have a mane going around their necks and female lions don't. But you helped me understand that.
Yeah, that's definitely a sexual difference within lions that probably has all of this communication significance. But it turns out that probably males and females approach the significance of the manes in different ways. So male lions can have manes that differ both in color and in different length. Their color can vary anywhere from sort of dark brunette to blonde, and the males pay attention a lot to that color in terms of looking at the hierarchy of the male, but the females tend to pay attention more to the length of the mane, and females will tend to mate with the males that have the longest manes.
I mean, that is just kind of amazing. I mean, it had never occurred to me that they're sort of reading each other that way, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is an example of some of the fascinating stuff that you're going to find out. I mean, I am not kidding when I say we are barely scratching the surface of this topic, but we've been visiting with Kent Dunlap. His book is The Neck, A Natural and Cultural History. You've got to get it to read the rest of it. He's a professor at nearby Trinity College. We are going to, in the final segment today, switch around a little bit. We are going to talk about one of those fashion critics who writes about things having to do with the neck, and that is going to be the turtleneck. We're going to take a deep dive into the turtleneck after this, so stay with us. Time to say some quick thank yous. The first goes to the maestro, Dylan Reyes, who's our technical producer. Lily Tyson, the head of Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Network, is the senior producer of our show and the producer of this episode. And we've been talking about necks. And so it seemed appropriate that we talk also about something that might, on certain occasions, obscure the neck. No, not scarves. We are going to talk about the turtleneck. We're going to do that with Nancy McDonald, fashion journalist and fashion historian. She writes the Wall Street Journal column, Fashion with a Past. Her new book is Empresses of 7th Avenue, World War II, New York City, and the Birth of American Fashion. Nancy, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Colin. I'm delighted to be here.
So, let's begin in the past. So I had not known this until I read your work, but it turns out that turtlenecks start maybe in the Middle Ages and with a fairly unlikely constituency. Tell us about this.
Yes, you are correct. We're talking about medieval knights who wore not what we would consider the modern turtleneck, but a turtleneck-like garment under their armor. It protected them from chafing because chainmail is not very comfortable next to the skin.
Right. And I believe also certain medieval knights, I'm thinking William Wallace and Richard the Lionhearted, they were also really into jazz. So that might have been the other reason for the turtlenecks.
Yeah, that's the berets as well.
Right. So now as we move forward in time, we want to sort of tease apart the semiotics of this. But, I mean, things start to come along that look kind of like turtlenecks. I mean, you could think about Queen Elizabeth I, and there's that big ruff of a thing that she always has around her. I don't know that really counts as a turtleneck, though.
It's a neck covering. I don't know if we could call it a turtleneck, but it is an item of fashion that covers the neck. Although some of her ruffs just went behind her head and showed off some décolletage. So,
and we'll come back to that particular question. But so in the 19th century, they start to be commonly available to people who are not wearing chainmail. So who are those people?
Well, we first see knitwear being used for sports. And the term sweater is actually very literal. It absorbed sweat or perspiration. So it was something this was way before any sort of technical fabrics were invented. So sportswear was often made of wool. And the turtleneck was worn especially for outdoor cold weather activities.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn my mind back to Chariots of Fire, which is sort of right around the time of World War I. And I think a number of the Olympic athletes they're not wearing anything. They're not wearing what Usain Bolt would have been wearing. They are wearing sort of knitwear, and maybe some of it is a little bit turtlenecky. But at some point, the turtleneck, the semiotics of the turtleneck start to be linked to bohemians, intellectuals, artistic people. When does that happen, and do we have any idea why?
Yes, this starts to happen. Well, it becomes associated with, I would say, intellectualism, creativity, independent thinkers. It goes back to the mid 20th century, when especially the black turtleneck was associated with French intellectuals and beatniks. The singer Juliette Greco really created that beatnik look. She was a Parisian singer in the post-World War II years, and she wore black turtlenecks, black tights when these were not really worn. Women wore sheer stockings instead. She had unkempt hair. So she really created that look. And then it was taken up in Hollywood films like Funny Face, starring Audrey Hepburn. You know, at the start of the film, she's this intellectual bookstore employee who wears a black turtleneck.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that happens is that people in real life may be wearing a certain kind of thing, like a turtleneck in a bohemian or beatnik environment. But then this all gets reinforced. I'm sure if I went back and watched The Sandpiper with Liz Taylor and Richard Burton, all those beatniky people who are there at the Big Sur Beach or whatever, I'm sure some of them are wearing turtlenecks. I bet you Maynard G. Krebs, who was the sidekick to Dobie Gillis and was this kind of stylized version of a beatnik. We're starting so it's something that might be happening in a kind of quote unquote organic way, but then media begins to manipulate the image, right?
Yes.
And so is there any way to kind of unpack that a little bit more? Is it a rejection of the jacket? And let me just tell you a quick story, actually. So I went to school. I was in a all-boys day school and during the late 60s, early 70s. And it was a school where you were required to wear a jacket and tie. So, of course, everybody didn't want to wear a jacket and tie. And when turtlenecks sort of they were having a little bit of a vogue, you know, among hippies and stuff like that. And so could we wear turtlenecks with our jackets? And the answer was no, you have to wear a jacket and tie. And then in the way that teenagers will try to pick apart any set of rules, somebody asked if we could wear sweaters over our jacket and tie, and the answer was, well, yes, you can do that. So people started to wear turtlenecks over their jacket and tie. You had to sort of prove to a master from time to time that there actually was a jacket and tie underneath there. But there's something about the turtleneck that suggests a kind of rebellion against whatever the default mainstream style is, no?
Yes, it is. I mean, think of some turtleneck wearers that we've seen recently, like Steve Jobs, like Elizabeth Holmes when she was running Theranos. She also adopted the black turtleneck. It's this, it really focuses attention on the face. When your body and your neck are so completely covered, that's where the eye is drawn upward. You can't hide in a turtleneck, so you have to be quite confident to wear one. And I'm also reminded of Diana Vreeland's observation that elegance is refusal, and the turtleneck is one of the prime examples of that because it's so pared down, it's so unforgiving. It's a very strict silhouette. As I said, you have to be comfortable with putting so much emphasis on the face. It's not about what you're wearing, it's really about you.
Oh, I think that's beautifully said. And yes, you have these style icons like Audrey Hepburn. I mean, it's sort of not fair, right? Because Audrey Hepburn would probably look pretty good in some chainmail from the 16th century with a turtleneck underneath it. It's very misleading for her to wear a turtleneck and have everybody else think, well, that's for me as well. But yeah, I feel like I think there are other messages that it sends. And I think in the case of Jobs and then afterwards Elizabeth Holmes, who may have almost killed the black turtleneck when all was said and done, I think there's a kind of like, I'm busy. I'm too busy to tie a tie, to have a tie dragging across the keyboard where I'm inventing some really important new thing. I need to streamline myself so I have low maintenance clothing that I don't have to worry about very much. I don't know. You're nodding. That encourages me.
Yes, I think there is something in that. I'm just putting my turtleneck on, and they both wore them all the time. Steve Jobs had a wardrobe of them. His jeans and his turtleneck, they were actually quite high-end. I believe Issey Miyake made his turtlenecks. But it did give the message that he was not wasting his time on something as frivolous as fashion. I don't think fashion is frivolous, but that is certainly a widespread misconception, I'm going to call it. Yes, he was showing that he was focused on more serious things than fashion. Same with Elizabeth Holmes. Although once her trial began, she dropped the turtlenecks and began wearing much more neutral colors and business attire.
That's interesting, right? And like, meanwhile, Michael Cohen, when he was in court, was wearing a turtleneck. So make up your minds, people. Is it a way to get your sentence lightened, or I think maybe the semiotics aren't entirely clear there. You said before that you can't. There's a certain way in which you can't hide in a turtleneck. I would, however, point out, because I'm obsessed, of course, with the fashion choices of Victoria Beckham, that she has like these really gigundo turtlenecks that she pulls them on and they're still like touching her bottom of her earlobes or something. It really is almost like I'm walking out here. If I see any paparazzi, if anybody wants my autograph, or anybody comes up to me who has a head cold, I'm just going to disappear inside this thing.
Yeah, maybe that's recalling, it is protective. As I'm sure your other guest was saying, the neck is a very vulnerable area of the body. So it's protective against the cold, but I think it's also psychological. It's historically, say, when subjects would bow to a king or queen, they were showing deference, but they were also showing vulnerability. They were baring their necks. They were submissive to the monarch's authority. The monarch had the power of life and death over them. Not quite the same with Victoria Beckham, but I think there is a protective instinct there against, the paparazzi or whoever else she might encounter during her day.
Yeah. And, once again, it's a really complicated symbol system because it's also kind of a Bond villain thing a little bit. Like, that
60s, the white turtleneck under the jacket, the Nehru jacket sort of look.
Yeah. It's sort of a Bond villain thing. But on the other hand, President Macron of France occasionally dives into a turtleneck,
He will. Yeah.
So what's going on there?
I think he was doing that too when energy prices became very high after the invasion of Ukraine. I think he was encouraging the French to maybe not use quite so much natural gas and to maybe layer up in a sweater. I think that was the message there. Also, he's French. He can get away with, wearing a turtleneck. Yeah,
and I think he wants to have sort of an artsy side. I mean, maybe that's just baked into being French, like a baguette. But I think there's sort of this sense of I'm not just this guy who's in control of the water system or something,
Yeah.
I read books. I could write books if I had some time. It's a little bit more of that kind of thing anyway.
It's just a bit of a maverick.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think that if there's a common thread that runs through everything that we're saying, from Bond villains to Macron to Bex, it's sort of, I'm not like everybody else.
And I'm so confident in that I'm going to wear a turtleneck so you look at my face all the time.
And so sort of right now, how are turtlenecks doing? I read a piece, I think it was in The Cut, about how turtlenecks for young women are the perfect first date thing to wear, and particularly because you can also wear a turtleneck and a jacket over it to work and go from there to your Tinder date or whatever it is. But how are turtlenecks doing at the moment?
They're doing well. Turtlenecks are classics, so in times of uncertainty, classics are comforting. They're familiar. They look good then, they look good now. So people turn to those things.
All right. So we're going to have to stop there, but this is fascinating. I don't know anything about fashion, but I'm always fascinated by people who do. And you certainly do. Nancy McDonald is fashion journalist and fashion historian, writes for the Wall Street Journal in the column Fashion with the Past. Her new book is Empresses of 7th Avenue, World War II, New York City, and the Birth of American Fashion. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Colin. It was a pleasure talking with you.
All right. And thanks to the rest of you for listening. Be happy about your neck. Nora had her issues with her neck, but the rest of you, love the neck you have, because you can't be with the neck that you love.
Come on, baby, come on. Baby, come on, baby, come on. Yo, you best protect your neck. You best protect your neck. You best protect